make a digital health record that is extremely simple to use and extremely high performant, you can get healthcare workers to record longitudinal records for patients. Talk to healthcare workers at the beginning. 6 years ago, I was in India a lot, and we were talking to healthcare workers. And you ask healthcare workers at the end of every interview with a healthcare worker, I'd ask, well, what can I do to make your life better? They literally, 9 out of 10 healthcare workers would say, don't.
This is Audiogyan, and I am your host, Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world.
So, Daniel and I want to sort of explore the relationship between product and design a little bit, right? And those blurred lines, like Kedar mentioned. I mean, you're, of course, the director of both product and design at RTSL. I'm curious how you distinguish between the two verticals on a day to day, like especially in terms of concerns, metrics, or anything else.
Right. So there's a designer from Capital One which is an American bank, who asked a few years ago what the difference is in terms of focus between a product manager, an engineer, and a designer. And I thought it was a very provocative question, because you see in a lot of good tech organizations that there's a three-legged stool. So those three groups are supposed to have tension between them. And engineering is usually measuring performance, so technical performance of the software. Does it do what we want it to do, and is it highly performant? PMs are usually focused on business metrics. Are we achieving the goals of our organization? And there was a lot of confusion among designers on Twitter about what is design's metric. And I really think design is about making sure the user or the customer is front and center in terms of decision making. Are we creating a great experience for our customers? That doesn't put them at odds with business. It doesn't put them at odds with engineering. But the tension among those three groups is what makes great long-term products. Because what you see a lot of times in product management is they're measuring business metrics. And business metrics are often quarterly or annual metrics. And you can really undermine your long-term success by only measuring in the short term. Design's better, I think, at looking a little bit more long-term and also looking a bit more qualitatively at your customers, no matter who your customers are. And bringing that knowledge together creates a successful long-term vision for an organization.
Good. So, Shreyas, you had anything as a follow-up?
Not right now. I think you can carry on.
Okay, cool. So, Daniel, you mentioned about like this tension, right? Like, could you elaborate on how do you define, or what kind of defines a product manager, and what kind of who's a designer according to you, right? Because most of the time you also said like long term, but it's also identifying or defining the right problems also. Now sometimes a product manager comes with articulating a solution as well, to which again there's a classic tension. A lot of designers say then we are trained to solve problems, so don't give us a solution, tell us the problem statement, right? So where do you see these lines kind of blurring? Is there a primary task, or is it a co-owned responsibility when it comes to experience?
Right. I think part of the challenge, there's kind of two challenges here. One is that as you become more senior as a designer, your role becomes a lot more product management in terms of, strategically, are we achieving our goals? You're not just being tasked with creating a user interface. You're not just being tasked with creating a product. You're being tasked with achieving organizational goals. And so, that's where you see me in my career, where the two roles really have merged for me. And now I'm a product manager and a designer. It's also a problem that I think designers have been very poor at defining what is design. we're sitting here, three senior designers, and you're asking what is design. It's really indicative of a problem among designers, that design is graphic design, and design is user interface design, and design is copywriting, and design is user research. Like, those things are all design. And then it becomes, now there's since Facebook, 10 years ago, there's now a role called product design. And product design is literally the blurring of product management and design. And I think it's a good thing. There's a really wonderful article probably 10 years ago that Jared Spool wrote, he's a well-known user researcher in the United States. And he was pointing out that if you look at an organization like Netflix, when you're watching TV at home on Netflix and your internet connection is a little bit unstable, and the little spinner shows up in your app on the television that says buffering, buffering, buffering. We've all been there. We've all seen that little thing. Designers didn't decide to put a buffering, logo over the screen. An engineer decided that. That is fundamentally user experience. When should we show our viewers a buffering logo? How should we show it to them? I doubt in the first versions of that any designers even had a conversation about it. It was probably just engineers were just like, when it gets to about this level of latency, we're going to, have an if statement in the code that says, stop showing the thing, try to cache it for X period of time until this much data has been cached, and then we'll start playing again. It's a really, really important part of the Netflix user experience. So if designers want to be successful at crafting a user experience, it's not about who owns the user experience. I think that's a really poor way of looking at it. It's really about how do we get everyone in our organization to care about user experience. And that's where designers are advocates. I think designers especially as organizations get larger, a large part of your role is advocating what good user experience is like. What are we trying to achieve to make our customers happy long term and for them to love our brand? And if there can be a common understanding of this, then engineers make better user experience decisions. Product managers especially make better user experience decisions and involve designers more early in the process and all during the process to help create a better user experience. Rather than dictating this is how we do a product, rather than just saying, okay, design, you go off for the next 2 months and solve this problem. Like, neither version of that is good. What you really want is integrated teams solving problems together with differentiated skills.
That's a brilliant articulation, actually. But then, do you kind of not advocate having specialization? Because now I was just reading about some days ago that within design also there have been some 13 types of designers. There's UI designer, motion designer, interaction designer. It's just I don't know where it's going to end. But then how do we kind of look at design as a function if this is what you're sort of pointing to?
Yeah, I honestly think that specialization is a dangerous trend in design. I think even at the big companies, having fairly generalist designers who can kind of do copywriting, do at least some basic user research so they understand how to leverage kind of experienced researchers, being able to design an icon where you need an icon, or at least work with the illustration team and understand what makes a great illustration. I mean, designers keep throwing around the word unicorn a lot as a dismissive term when hiring, but I do think it's extremely valuable for designers to have a fairly broad toolkit so you can apply it. And once in a while I hear professors, trying to recommend to students not to be a generalist because they're like, oh, a jack of all trades, you'll be a master of nothing. But I look at a lot of specialists and I'm like, you're really just pigeonholing yourself into a very minor part of the design process. If you want to have larger influence in your organization, if you want to gain seniority and, really be truly effective, you're going to need to know a little bit about coding. You're going to have to know a little bit about graphic design. you're going to have to know a lot about user interface design and product design. Because if you want to work as a product designer, your project is to ship great products. And that requires, either a huge team of specialists or some generalists who can work with specialists and, create a very effective dynamic team that can solve the right problem in front of them. But, I would love to get into a debate about this. I'm a generalist, so maybe I just think generalists are the best. But I've certainly seen generalists be very effective, even at large orgs.
Yeah, yeah. No, even I
have a
agree
follow-up to
because
that.
yeah.
Sorry,
No, go ahead,
go
go
on.
ahead.
No, I was just curious, Daniel. Do you think this only becomes more important in the sense that designers have to be great curators going forward as more and more execution level details get automated? Like, do you sort of see it that way?
Yeah, I just literally like 30 minutes ago was sitting down with a woman who's a founder of an AI startup doing graphic design. And I was definitely thinking that during our conversation. I think if you think your job can be automated away, whether you're, a pretty light front end coder or doing basic illustration, not super creative illustration, then you should start thinking about broadening your skills. I think those base skills will likely be automated. I mean, they're more automated now than they were 15 years ago. The real power in design is strategic and problem solving. And it's been the same way since the beginning of my career. 25 years ago, I started to design. The most interesting part is problem solving. And problem solving is it's the hardest part to automate.
And would you add judgment to that as well?
Well, judgment's part of problem
Problem
solving.
solving.
Sure. Are we solving the right problems? Are we doing
Right.
it in the right way?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it gets complex also because one of the things which I'm very convinced is when I spoke to Rush Bhatt, who was the founder of ClearTrip, and I said who's a designer, and he gave a nice example that a sculptor knows the marble, right, or the stone or whatever, like the actual medium, and even the architect knows how the RCC works and how like actual bricks are laid down and so on and so forth. Similarly, when a digital product designer is working, I think they should know three things. One is design, like which again is quite an open thing. But second is copy, which is communication, because finally you are interacting. And third is code, how it works, right? Because finally that's the medium. So I think depending on the stage of the company, also we might want to pick in few specialists, but broadly we can safely say it will be generalist because you need to understand the dynamics. So if it's an advanced stage company, fairly profitable, then problem statement and discovering deeper nuances of problems can be helpful. But it's an early age where you have to ship. It's kind of 0 to 1, so you need like more people who know code, designers who know how to code and ship actual pixel perfect experiences. So yeah, it's kind of, yeah, that's why I said it becomes complex, and as we add more layers to it.
Yeah.
Cool. And seems like, so Daniel, designer can be a PM. Can it be the other way around, right? In this context, any hard skills? Because for the longest time, I've been contributing to product, but I'm kind of staying away from a data a bit, from those like classic spreadsheets and complex looker boards. Definitely, at a broad level I understand, but like, are there any hard skills which are kind of overlapping, and then can it be the other way around?
There are definitely hard skills that are overlapping. I mean, in terms of setting priorities, in terms of, metrics, you don't have to necessarily be hardcore into Looker to set excellent OKRs, for instance. If you guys have used objective key results as a strategic kind of team driving force, it's well within a designer's capability to do this stuff. And you start off with your design team, and then you move up in the product org to thinking, strategically, what are our real goals as an org. I think there is definitely possible for PMs to become designers. I mean, anybody can become a designer. I think it's not, a natural set of skills that people are born with. Um, but it would involve learning a lot of technical stuff. Even learning Figma, as you guys are old head designers and you learned Figma after you learned Illustrator or, one of the other tools, they have very steep learning curve to get into. Learning things like, visual hierarchy, user flows, that kind of thing is surprisingly difficult. It's easy to forget that after 25 years. So, you probably either have to do a lot of hacking or, take a design course. I've definitely seen people do it. Relatively rare, but it's definitely possible. And it would make especially if a PM comes in without an engineering background, just as a pure PM, maybe they've got a business or a marketing background. It would be very useful for them to broaden their skills, even just to know how to work with designers more closely. Not necessarily to tell designers what to do, but it's pretty hard if you're not a great engineer to like manage an engineering team. It's I think in many orgs, design rolls up into product. If you don't understand design, from a hands-on perspective, it's quite difficult to manage designers, I think.
Makes
So
sense.
at least get your hands dirty a little bit.
And Daniel, to just flip that a little bit, right? A little earlier, you mentioned how with more senior roles, designers are expected to contribute to product management. And then something I've been curious about is why aren't there more designers taking up these product management roles? Um, why do you think that happens? And do you think there's a case for designers to consider that seriously as an option?
I'll answer your second question first. Yes. I think I'm confused why there aren't more designers who take on more product management. If you want someone else to tell you what problems to solve and then you go and solve those problems, it's fine if that's what you're into. I think designers come with this kind of a unique perspective on being able to think about user needs and how to go and learn from your customers in order to know what to build. I think that should have more power within organizations. I think we'd have more better products in the world that actually solve user needs instead of just squeezing value out of people. And if you want to do that, you're not going to do it from just within the design column. You really need more product management skills and work more at the strategic level. For all the designers who are complaining about not having a seat at the table, it's largely because designers often don't want to get so involved in spreadsheets and strategy and why the board is asking for things and what fundraising means for our organization and how that drives pressure down into the product teams. How our engineering infrastructure is, limiting our choices of kind of what we can do on the product side. You have to care about all these things if you want to solve the larger problems. I think a lot of designers are comfortable staying in their lane. I'm not. So I got more involved in the product side of things. So what was your first question? Is how to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I was curious why that path
Oh, why
isn't
don't
more.
more people
Yeah,
do
yeah,
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What are the barriers in
Yeah.
people's minds?
Yeah, I think part of it, especially here in the UK, but I see it in India as well, is a lot of designers did get a design education. I didn't. I grew up just hacking on design and with some friends. But I think from what I've seen, a lot of design educators really, really push craft. Even I heard you say earlier that about shipping pixel perfect designs. That's very much about craft, right? And designers have been taught that craft, typography, like these very detailed elements of design are the most important thing. And if you think those are the most important thing, that feels like you're wasting your time when it's beneath you to work on strategy and OKRs and, tracking metrics over time. Because it's taking me away from my craft. And I think there's a very, very strong feeling among designers that like the true, measure of a designer is, how good you are at craft. I think it's overrated. I think you can be great at craft and still fail, or fail at having larger impact, I think. And, when you look at, I actually look sometimes at kind of the old head designers, so the generation before us, who are now in their 60s. And they used to talk a lot about things like corporate reports. Like, ooh, look at this amazing design manual, or look at this incredible corporate annual report for a big corporation. And as product designers, I look at that and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that has no influence over anything. Like, a bunch of like rich hedge fund people like flipped through this annual report and like invested, and maybe they liked the typography, but I doubt it had much impact. Like, but that used to be considered the top of design, because it was very craft driven. And so I think that permeates still today to designers, that we care a lot about making pixel perfect designs.
I have a slightly different
Am I making you
opinion.
uncomfortable?
No, it's not uncomfortable, definitely, because in my recent kind of gig, even I am questioning that a lot, where there are certain profitable companies who are not great with UI, and not even profitable, but okay, not even profitable,
Sorry.
but just like if we take an example of booking.com or amazon.com, they are not like, yeah, I mean, their experience lies somewhere else, right? Nine people are looking at this in an ugly red font just next to the button is kind of helping them convert.
It's
Now
great
is
design.
correct. Now, where does aesthetic lie? But I think that will be a separate conversation altogether. Um, but yeah, I'm kind of making peace with this. Can beautiful be scalable, and can beautiful also bring business? I don't know right now. History has shown it doesn't matter.
Is beauty the goal?
Yeah, that's where I said, like, it's kind of,
Certainly not the goal at booking.com.
yeah,
Yeah.
correct. Fair enough. I fairly don't have a, yeah, frankly don't have a comeback on that. Cool. Shreyas, you had anything
Yeah,
on
yeah, no,
follow?
and I just had a small follow up there. I definitely agree with Daniel's school of thought, and I guess where I'm coming from is there is this craft path that designers can take, and I think what Daniel is also saying, that hey, there is this other path that you can take where you can be strategic and you're still a designer even if you're not dealing with craft directly. And that path is also really exciting, and that's something that you should explore. Is that right, Daniel, in terms of how I'm framing this?
I think so. I would quibble a little bit with saying should explore. I think I
Can
find it very
explore.
interesting. I think there's,
Yeah.
if designers want to craft user interfaces and make icons, that knock themselves out.
Right.
It's a great career. Sorry, go ahead.
Got it. And actually, on a related note, right? I think one criticism of product managers, and like folks like Marty Kagan, and even from designers I've hung out with, sort of mentioned that product managers often function as project managers, right? And in your view, what do you think a product manager really brings to the table? And you obviously mentioned the short term business metrics, pushing them is a focus, but what do you think ideally in a great product team the PM is really looking at in conjunction with the designer and the engineer?
I mean, the so yes, product managers often do get driven into project management. Um, Even on our small team, we have a full time project manager, and she's this great woman based in Nigeria, and her whole thing is to know is air traffic control, right? Where are the planes? Who's landing? Who can take off? What loads can we take on next? So very much sprint management. So if you're not careful, product management can become a lot of project management. And we're fairly careful to kind of pull those two apart a bit. To me, a great product manager is primarily focused on strategic vision. Are we working on the right thing? How will we know if we've achieved our goals? And communicating the vision down to the team, whether that's the broad vision, so for us, how do we achieve our goal of helping tens of millions of patients to have their blood pressure managed more effectively? That's just fundamentally our vision. But then quarterly, how are we implementing that vision? Which bets are we making? And then how will we know if we were successful at making those bets? And then down the next level is the specific products that we're making to, on those bets. How are we defining them? What problems are they solving? How are we going to make them? How is design working on getting out in front and doing the early experimentation and product definition early enough so we can stay ahead of the engineers? So that much project management, I think, is part of PMing. But I think if all you're doing is just, you're a railway conductor, making sure that the trains are running on time and that our engineers are being used most efficiently, then you've got a pretty mediocre PM org. Yeah.
Right.
Also, if they're bossing people around, Google had this problem where they called PMs for a while. That PMs started calling themselves the CEO of the product. I think that's also problematic. They don't have to be, that positioning of the CEO as the head of product. Like we define what we're doing. Designers will make the interface. Engineers will make it reality. Comes out of fear a lot of the time because they're terrified they don't know what they're making. And so if I just tell everyone what to do, then we'll do that. Whereas if you're more comfortable with yourself and you're okay being wrong, you can say to the teams, hey, this is the direction we're going. These are the problems we need to solve. And this is how we'll know if we're successful. Let's start experimenting with prototypes in that direction. Let's start spiking on engineering solutions to that problem. Come back with feedback, then set the direction together and come up with a product that incorporates the benefits of engineering thinking, product thinking, and design thinking to form a cohesive, great product. And that's how really great product teams work. Not some bossy PM and also not some bossy designer trying to tell everybody, oh, this is the user experience we will create. That mostly doesn't work, or it only works for a little while.
And this sounds similar to how you described a great designer also plays their role, right? More as a facilitator of a great user experience. This sounds very familiar there.
Yeah.
So, Daniel, you mentioned Simple's vision a little bit. To listeners who may not know much about Simple, I'm actually curious if you want to maybe talk a little bit about that vision at Simple and what you're looking at doing. And maybe then we can get into how it's like designing for impact over, say, market share or other business metrics.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt, but do you mind just taking? I wanted the one step before we jump into that is. So Daniel, you mentioned about this not being a bossy PM, but a lot of companies I've seen tech and design both function report to product. Sometimes it's everyone reporting to tech. So is there any best practice? Is there that you have observed what works best in the industry for what kind of domain?
I mean, the best teams I've seen really do function as a three-legged stool, where design, engineering, and product are partners in defining the vision and achieving the goals. But
still, there needs to be one kind of accountable person, right? Or
not necessarily. You can have self-managed teams. This is how our team operates. There's not one person in charge. I don't manage our engineer and I don't manage our PM. We just hired a PM 6 months ago who took part of my job off my shoulders. And we function as a 3-person team with our chief medical officer. So I think there should be a lot of, even if the PM is technically at the top of the ladder, because, usually if you're thinking about reporting up into the rest of the org, whether it's to the CEO or to the broader product team, the PM can be the one who's reporting. The PM can even be the one who's managing engineering and design, or the engineer could. But in terms of setting the product vision, in terms of functioning as a team, I think three peers is really the ideal situation. And it's like any team, even if the PM was in charge and has veto power, if you're exercising veto power very often, you have a pretty shit team. And you do definitely see this, and I definitely see it in India. There's a strong idea of like, whoever's in charge must be respected. Whoever's in charge is like the boss. But it works the same way in the UK, more so than in America. But I think that's a poor way of operating. I think three peers is really ideal. And you see that a lot in Silicon Valley.
I guess this goes back to,
Yeah.
Daniel, what you were saying about the tension, right? That great products long term happen because of that tension, and not having one person just take decisions and having veto in that trio. Yeah.
Yes.
So Kedar, let me just
please
repeat
follow.
that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Daniel, you mentioned Simple's vision a little bit. Every time I hear you talk about it, I get really excited. So I'm curious to hear you talk about it again, especially for listeners who may not know much about Simple or RTSL. What's the vision that you're working on? And maybe then we can get into how you design for impact versus, say, market share or other typical business metrics.
Yeah. So get this. I work at a not-for-profit. That's a public health not-for-profit. So the guy who started Resolve to Save Lives is Dr. Tom Frieden, who ran the Centers for Disease Control in America under President Obama. So he's like, in the public health world, is kind of a titan of public health. And when he left the CDC, he started Resolve to Save Lives to work on the biggest killers in the world. We work on two things. We work on cardiovascular disease, which is the thing I'm focused on. And we also work on epidemic preparedness. So cardiovascular disease is the biggest killer in the world by far. Just hypertension alone, hypertension is the fancy word for high blood pressure, kills more people than all infectious diseases combined. So there's lots of focus on things like HIV and tuberculosis and malaria and all these infectious diseases. We all take hypertension for granted. In India, about 1 in 3 adults has hypertension. Similar in America, similar in the UK. So there's an enormous number of people with high blood pressure. And if they had their lower blood pressure, they'd have a much lower chance of having heart attacks and strokes. The cool thing with Resolve is that we're almost all public health people. Almost everyone I work with has a master's of public health or a doctor of public health, and they are doctors and policymakers, and they work on huge public health projects. To have a successful hypertension program, though, you need to do lots of public health things, but to run a great program, you need good data so you can see where things are working and where things aren't working. And in almost all the places where we work, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Ethiopia, Nigeria, record keeping in most of the clinics is paper-based. And almost none of it is longitudinal. So the idea that, Shreyas comes in today for a visit and then comes back a month later for a visit, in most clinics, Shreyas is considered a new patient both times. Yeah, maybe he remembers a little bit about what happened last time. But if you don't have a record of Shreyas's health over time, it's really hard to say, are we doing better by Shreyas? And then are we doing better by all of the patients who come to our hospital? And our theory 6 years ago when I joined Resolve to Save Lives was, if you make a digital health record that is extremely simple to use and extremely high performant, you can get healthcare workers to record longitudinal records for patients. A typical clinical visit in India in the public health system is about 3 to 4 minutes. So a patient will stand in line for an hour, 2 hours, and then be seen by a clinician for 3 to 4 minutes. In Bangladesh, it's under 2 minutes. It's unbelievable. I've spent a lot of time in Bangladeshi hospitals. They are they'll see 150, 200 patients a day. A single clinician will see that many patients. If you're in North America, this seems unheard of. A typical clinical visit in North America is 15 minutes. You have lots of time to talk to the patient. You've got lots of time to treat them. In that few minutes that a clinician in India or Bangladesh has with a patient, they need to listen to the patient, take measures like blood pressure and blood glucose measures. They need to distribute medicines. They need to counsel the patient. If you want them to also write down anything, it has to be super fast. So we built an extremely lightweight system that right now the median time to record a patient visit is 13 seconds. So I scan an ID, I enter the blood pressure, I update the medicines, I schedule a follow-up visit. I'm done in 13 seconds. And they'll do this hundreds of times a day. So as a user interface designer, you have to remember these healthcare workers, A, didn't come to use your software. They came to treat patients who are sitting across the table from them. So that if anything, your software is just getting between them and the patient. And B, they're doing this tons of times a day. Like if you guys had to do a task 120 times a day, you would hate it. So our main goal is not to be hated. And when we talk to healthcare workers at the beginning, 6 years ago, I was in India a lot, and we were talking to healthcare workers. And you ask healthcare workers, at the end of every interview with a healthcare worker, I'd ask, well, what can I do to make your life better? And they literally, 9 out of 10 healthcare workers would say, don't make my life harder. And you're like, fair enough. Like your job's really hard. And this is before COVID. Like, woo. During and after COVID, I mean, healthcare workers' jobs are really, really hard. So we make a very, very lightweight medical record that can work in these super busy environments. As used right now, I think in the introduction you said 2 million patients. We're at 4.5 million now. And so we record over 1 million follow-up visits every month.
Wow.
So, if you think of that in a distributed way, there's all these patients coming back and forth to hospitals, and there's healthcare workers dotted all over these countries who are just pounding in patient data. And 1 million times this month, and then the patients all come back next month, and there's a 1.1 million. Then they all come back the next month. Now there's 1.2 million. It's just a growing challenge to manage, enormous numbers of patients. So our goal is to support big public health programs and reduce deaths from heart attacks and strokes. Yeah.
That's really exciting, Daniel. I think one question that sort of came to mind is, you mentioned the tension between sort of long-term metrics and short-term metrics. And I'm sorry to bring it back to design a little bit, but I'm curious in your case, since the goal is obviously very long-term, do you also face some short-term metrics that have tension with long-term as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, you don't build software to manage patients. You build features, you know? And you have to balance, are we going to spend engineering resources this quarter on upgrading security? We had some challenges with, kind of how we were encrypting data on devices. So are we going to invest engineering resources in that? Or the healthcare workers are yelling at us that they need, a feature to see whether or not they should titrate a patient's medicines or change a patient's medicines. There's a balance between those two things. Which one should we do? One, we're getting yelled at by users, and our users are really important to us. The other one is if we ever had a security breach, it would crater the entire project, right? So which one has the long-term versus short-term trade-offs? We did the security thing. So as a product manager, you're like, we couldn't possibly afford being cratered. The news article of, when systems in India get penetrated by hackers, it makes the national press. It will kill your project.
Yeah.
I want to just have a follow up on this because,
Sure.
being a designer, I'm kind of pointing to a thing that they have. I don't know. It's maybe because of the education or whatever, cultural thing, but there has been a romantic side to designers also, right? Like emotions and research and empathy and these kind of things, right? Now, the example that you gave, security versus kind of users complaining a lot, right? How do you balance this data versus kind of real emotions, right? Because there will be a tension, and then especially in the healthcare, like, what is there any uh, framework, or is there any method to resolve this gracefully?
No, there's no framework. At least I don't have one. It's all. I mean, if you just graph things on a grid and look, on a matrix and look at, which things are, how much effort is something, what is the reward, and what's the potential downside. I mean, the potential upside of increasing our security is not great. It doesn't, users won't notice the change. Hopefully no one ever notices anything. Everything continues to run perfectly well, and everything was under the hood. But the potential downsides are enormous. And designers, not enough designers, I think about these things. Like Simple has on device, after 5 minutes, the app locks, but we created a 4-digit PIN that healthcare workers can enter when they're creating their account, that they can unlock it. That means they can unlock it without an internet connection, right? Because it's just stored on device. 4 digits isn't super secure. If you talk to a security expert, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, that's not secure enough." But if you ask them to remember a 7-digit PIN, they're likely to start forgetting it, and then they're going to start writing it down. And I know that the app's going to lock at least a dozen times a day on a healthcare worker, but choosing whether to do a 4-digit PIN, choosing how often to lock the device, choosing whether or not to invest in like biometric unlocking, choosing all of these things, that's design. I mean, it's very similar to the Netflix example I gave a few minutes ago. If you think of the user experience of your software, this is very high on the list of user experience issues for an actual healthcare worker. And they won't think about it a lot. But I've seen other software that's deployed in clinics that requires you to type in an email address and a password every 10 minutes. And it just doesn't get used after a while, because healthcare workers get frustrated and they're too busy, and it takes them 20 seconds to log in, to type all of that crap in, and they just stop using it. I wish more designers cared.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other reason why I find this really fascinating, especially in your case, right, is because you have this problem of sort of somebody else paying or subsidizing the product, and perhaps the user is not paying for it, which makes it so much harder to actually get them to use it.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. The balances are strange, because obviously in our case, we're working primarily in public health systems. And their boss is certainly telling them to use it. Someone's coming once a month, and if they're not using it, to record most of their patients, they're going to get told off. So there is downward pressure, and you have to be really careful of not assuming that downward pressure will work, and also making sure that people don't get punished for your mistakes. If my software is hard to log into, but someone's yelling at you to log into it, well, they're going to force you through a crappy experience. So it's all these trade-offs. Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Shreyas. It's really, I think it's really important for designers to remember who the real customer is. In our case, the customer is government. But the customer is also healthcare workers. They work for the government, and they'll certainly make their displeasure known up the chain, or it'll be noticed if you're going to succeed. So, when I look at our user base, and we have, lots of slide decks of this, patients, healthcare workers, chief medical officers who run hospitals, health systems managers who run networks of hospitals, government officials who run the whole Ministry of Health, and then epidemiologists who are using this data for managing the system. They're all our users. And so it's a lot of balance between, which one is most important, at each juncture for achieving our goals. And you can't undermine any of them.
That's amazing. How are we doing on time, Kedar, by the way?
Yes, I
Yep.
think we have almost an hour. Maybe we can wrap up with 2 questions, one from my side and Shreyas from your side. One.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll like. So Daniel, like, what do you think the future is for product managers and designers? Like, how do you see it shaping in the coming time? With obviously with AI is the biggest piece, but from a healthcare sector, from any other important sector that you have been part of in the past, like what's
Maybe I can rephrase that. Maybe I'll tell you what I hope for.
perfect?
Because I'm not an expert on how AI is going to influence product teams at like eBay or PayPal. I don't know any of that. But what I do hope is what I see is a lot of effort going into big enterprise companies that came out of startups, the Slacks of the world and Stripe, and in India, the Flipkarts of the world and Razor Pay and all these, big startups. And a lot of designers are, crafting very successful careers, climbing the corporate ladder and succeeding. The most interesting parts of design to me are inventive, making new things that hadn't existed before and, making the world a little bit better. And if I look at my network, and I have a large network of designers, the number of people who work on the real problems of the world, environment, like the environment is probably the number one issue of today. I can name 2 designers I know who work on environmental projects. Education, couple, democracy, good voting systems, or access to good financial services for people who are at the fringes of the banking system, fair systems. Almost no one's working on this stuff. Public health, there's a few. And don't get me wrong, there are people who put in decades of work here who nobody knows their name. They're not famous, they're not asked to be on podcasts. But I wish we could change the world of design a bit, where we start figuring out ways to work on the problems that really matter to the world, to humanity, if I can speak bigly. I think we over optimize right now for good careers and stable tech companies. And I wish that more designers could be encouraged to come to places like public health, because honestly, public health feels like designing in 1999. Almost no one has enough designers on their team. Almost no one has money. Everything's engineering or business focused. It's like starting all over again over here, and like it's lonely, and the world could use it. I mean, most products are so badly designed. They just don't think about the user experience. They're just thinking about, do we have the features in place? So I would love to spend the next 15 years trying to think about how we get more designers to be able to have more impact in places that really benefit the world, and don't just, make a few more dollars for big tech companies. And before I sign off, I spent 5 years at Google. It's the largest advertising company in the world. I work there. I'm not throwing shade at people who work at big companies. But I do think there's a bigger world out there, and design would be great to get more engaged in it. Because it's hard. It's much harder over here than it is at Google. Because there's so many fewer resources and so many fewer patterns of what makes something good.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, I interviewed Ayaz Basrai, who's a architect slash industrial designer actually, but mainly working in hospitality sector. And he said that yes, there's a way to get your bread and butter and like pay your bills and stuff like that. But we just went out to like the local municipality in Bombay and said that hey, we heard that you are going to design a garden. We are trained architects, can we be part of this? And he said, okay, so if you're not going to add any money, there are 21 parks that have to be designed in and around Bandra, please go ahead and do it. And they did it, right? So it's a collective.
Amazing.
That's how they started. And we said like it's just like design intervention from technical aspect, otherwise they'll just put up some stuff. So I think that's how maybe people can start off, by extending in like another 8 to 10 feet radius of what they can do with design. Cool. I think that's from my side, but Shreyas, you have anything to conclude with?
Yeah, it's hard to pick one question to wrap things up with, but Daniel, maybe I can sort of double click on what you just said. Because you've worked with Google in the past, and obviously you're now working on seriously impactful problems. Like, was there an aha moment for you at some point which like tipped things over? And I'm curious to ask this because is that basically what needs to happen for more designers to work on, like you said, some of the most important problems, right? What will it take for that to happen? And I guess a related question
Yeah.
is that is why should designers specifically be excited about this? Like, what is that edge that designers bring to the table when they work on these kind of problems?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I can generalize. I know what happened to me is, was, almost 40 years old. I've been designing for a long time. I was working at Google Ventures, and like fundamentally, venture capital is take money, invest it in startups, and make it into more money. And we invested in a lot of good startups. Half the money was going to healthcare startups, which I thought was really interesting. But I was thinking, if I can wake up in the morning and do anything, and that's a very privileged position to be in, but I was in the position to wake up in the morning and do anything at all. Well, in some ways, you have a responsibility that, like, are you working on the best possible thing you could be working on? And venture capital is cushy, and you make a huge salary, and you get prestige. But is that the best thing I could work on? Obviously not. So I started looking at, kind of what I could work on that's more impactful, and that, could own more. Because the nice thing with venture capital is you just give people advice all the time. None of the problems are really your problems. They're all other people's problems. So I decided to leave that and to come, actually build something in a new space. But I do think more designers just need to. I think there's a certain type of designer who wants to go where design has never, hasn't had much impact before, and carve out kind of a new frontier. And it's not like I'm the first designer to ever work in public health. I don't mean that. But there's a huge field of opportunity here. And so for me, this is very exciting. And I hope as a culture of design, I think in some ways we're really lacking a culture of design. And that's something, you two are playing a role in. And we as a group of people can influence is, what do we believe as designers? Like, we're not a monolith, but we can have some shared goals. And I think one of those is to see, design positively impact the world. And not in the way Silicon Valley says. Silicon Valley uses those words to encourage people to work long hours to sell more ads. It's been a very effective marketing ploy. But I genuinely believe design has power to make the world better. And that's with working with other people who know how to make the world better. People like public health people like environmentalists, people like, entrepreneurs who are working on, meaningful projects. But design can definitely leverage the skills we have to help those projects succeed. If we can inspire more people in that direction, I think not everyone, but enough people will start maybe choosing different paths and starting to work on things that maybe matter a little more for the world.
Yeah. I think that's inspirational note. I wanted to add one more thing is that I'm struggling to find the exact count and the report also, but MP Ranjan, the professor, he mentioned a design professor. He mentioned there are, I think, 172 or 372. I forgot the exact count, but there are so many areas within India for design intervention is required. Right. So it just
go walk through a public hospital someday. Just within the hospital, you can see 30 places.
Yeah.
No,
Cool.
I'd love to see that list.
Yeah. I'll definitely find that and put in the show notes also. Cool. I think that's it. I mean, this conversation was really enriching, and we can keep talking. But since you have other commitments, I'll conclude on this point. Thank you, Daniel, for giving your time, and as usual, thanks, Shreyas, for being a co-host.
Of course. And thank you, Daniel, for sharing your thoughts again. Always a pleasure to host you.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. This is a great conversation.
Cool. That's it from today's GAN session. Thanks for listening till the end. I wish to once again thanks GDL for bringing this episode. GDL is an initiative of Boyce and Godrej and Boyce, launched in 2014. Today, GDL continues with the intention of making life brighter, better through exploring how design impacts our lives. And the team at GDL is focused on engaging the community through thought-provoking events, supporting upcoming talent, and showcasing how design innovation can create better products and systems. Do follow us on Instagram at Godrej Design Lab and Audiogyan Podcast. I'll put the Instagram handle and the website and all the links in the show notes for Own Path and Daniel. Thank you, people. Thanks, and hope to see you again. And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at Audiogyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.